When you think about racial equality and civil rights, which political party comes to mind? The Republicans or the Democrats? Most people would probably say the Democrats, but this answer is incorrect.
So this video I saw actually on our way down to Bike Week. I was watching on my phone, and so it's about black people and I guess the Republican Party. Now here's the thing: I've heard about this before, and I've heard videos about this, in the past, and actually not in the past. What am I saying? In the past, I've heard videos about this, 10 or 15 years ago, and this is
the past.
I mean, it is past, but it's not. I'm not talking about in the past, it's past, it's early past, not late past. But anyway, it's talking about black people in the Republican Party.
Since its founding in 1829, the Democratic Party has fought against every major civil rights initiative and has a long history of discrimination. The Democratic Party defended slavery, started the Civil War, opposed Reconstruction, founded the Ku Klux Klan, imposed segregation, perpetrated lynchings, and fought against the Civil Rights Acts of the 1950s and 1960s.
To be honest with you, they may have talked about this in history class, but I wasn't paying attention. Now, granted, I actually made A's and B's in history class, but I don't remember anything from history class. I think most of the stuff they were going over was just like general history, Civil War, and just stuff, right? Stuff like that. Anyway. After school, I heard more about stuff like this. And so I heard that, a lot of black people were mostly Republicans back in the day. I heard that there were more Republican, and I'm going to get this wrong, but just off the top of my head, I heard that there were the first senators and, things like that were black Republicans. The first blacks were Republicans that were senators and things like that. And so, and then also heard rumors of, Martin Luther King. He wasn't a Democrat, he was a Republican. I do have mixed views about some of that. And the reason why I will say I have mixed views about that is because I don't consider myself Republican. I don't actually consider myself Democrat. I consider myself to have conservative views, but the more that I look at it, I would consider myself to be more of a conservative Democrat. Mm-hmm. And the reason why I would say that, I don't even know if that really does a conservative Democrat really exist anymore? And the reason why I would say that is because growing up in the black church is very conservative. I mean, anybody who's grown up in a black church know how conservative black church is. I'm not even going to go into some of the I'm not going to even go into some of the things that are going on right now that used to, when I grew up in the black church, was a no-no, okay? But now is more accepted because I think it's more of the whole progressive thing. Mm-hmm. And so, but if you really get down to like my parents and, and how a lot of black people were raised, we were raised conservative even though we still were Democrats. You see what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. And so I think nowadays that's why some of the views I do line up with the Republican Party with some of the views that I have, but there's a lot of things on the Republican side that I don't really gel with, you know what I'm saying? But there's a lot of things on the Democrat side I don't really gel with either. So the problem that I have is that I consider myself an independent because when you get to the far right and the far left of these things, I don't like a lot of what's going on. I don't like a lot of these pockets that they play in. Mm. But long story short, this is talking about how most black people before I think like the 1950s or were Republicans. Most black people they're saying were Republicans. I don't know how true that is, but I've heard that quite a bit.
In contrast, the Republican Party was founded in 1854 as an anti-slavery party. Its mission was to stop the spread of slavery into the new Western territories with the aim of abolishing it entirely. This effort, however, was dealt a major blow by the Supreme Court in the 1857 case Dred Scott versus Sandford. The court ruled that slaves aren't citizens, they're property. The 7 justices who voted in favor of slavery, all Democrats. The 2 justices who dissented, both Republicans. The slavery question was, of course, ultimately resolved by a bloody civil war. The commander-in-chief during that war was the first Republican president, Abraham Lincoln, the man who freed the slaves. 6 days after the Confederate Army surrendered, John Wilkes Booth, a Democrat, assassinated President Lincoln. Lincoln's vice president, a Democrat named Andrew Johnson, assumed the presidency. But Johnson adamantly opposed Lincoln's plan to integrate the newly freed slaves into the South's economic and social order.
One of the things I don't like and I don't really care for is the separation. I think we have more things, as people and as families and as just generally, I think we have more things in common than we do have separate. I think when we start dividing each other into political parties, and here's the thing, I do understand that they're necessary to a degree, but I think when we're saying a Democrat did this or a Republican did this or a black Democrat or a black Republican or a white Democrat or a white Republican, I think we start drawing lines. And a lot of times when you start drawing lines, people feel like they can't cross those lines to find any type of compromise. And that's one of the things I don't like about the parties. I don't like when people basically go to their corners and then they look at the other person on the other side and they say, "You're wrong with all your ideas."
Yeah.
Because I think there's more in common.
Or they're like sticking by Joe Biden just because of their party.
And because really for me, I mean, be honest with you, I can't do that. I voted for Barack, but to be honest with you, with the things going on with Biden as far as the health issues and things like that, the possible health issues, I don't know, but it seemed like they're really there. I don't know if I can really go with that. And the thing is that
I don't know that he can go with it for another 4 years, to be honest.
And the thing is that people look at Trump and honestly, there's a lot of things I don't like about Trump, but at the same time, it's like what people say that you'll vote for the lesser of the two evils, and if you really sit down with most people and you talk to them, regardless of color or whatnot, if you took color and you took race out of all this stuff, and then you took political parties out of all this stuff, and you ask people what are they really interested in, they just honestly, most of them are going to say around about the same things. They want just equal opportunity for advancement and achievement. They want their families to be safe. They want to, just things that people have in common that.
Quality of life.
Yeah, quality of life. And so, but with the quality of life, then you have all these other issues and all these other things that are thrown on top of that, and everyone thinks that there's only a small piece of pie, and everybody has to grab as much of that piece of pie as possible. And that's when you start having this infight, and then you have this, separation of groups and things. And that's one of the things I don't like.
Johnson and the Democratic Party were unified in their opposition to the 13th Amendment, which abolished slavery, the 14th Amendment, which gave blacks citizenship, and the 15th Amendment, which gave blacks the vote. All three passed only because of universal Republican support. During the era of Reconstruction, federal troops stationed in the South helped secure rights for the newly freed slaves. Hundreds of black men were elected to Southern state legislatures as Republicans, and 22 black Republicans served in the U.S. Congress by 1900. The Democrats did not elect a black man to Congress until 1935. But after Reconstruction ended, when the federal troops went home, Democrats roared back into power in the South. They quickly reestablished white supremacy across the region with measures like black codes, laws that restricted the ability of blacks to own property and run businesses, and they imposed poll taxes and literacy tests used to subvert black citizens' right to vote. And how was all of this enforced? By terror, much of it instigated by the Ku Klux Klan, founded by a Democrat, Nathan Bedford Forrest.
So I really wanted to be just one of those sticklers here. You would say it's like, you see what the Democrats used to do. You see what all the Democrats used to do. You see how nowadays it's like they're not doing it as overtly. They're doing it more covertly by the way. And here's the thing. If I really wanted to be like that, yes, I could see that. But I think a lot of times it's what you choose to see and what you choose to go on, because I think, for a lot of people on the Democrat side is that they have empathy for a lot of things. Now, are they going about some of the things that they have empathy for the right way? That's where you kind of get into that, do I agree or do I don't agree? Because let's just say that I have, a feeling about something. Should I force what I have a feeling about on anyone else? And that's when I think and here's the thing, that's on the Republican side also. And so just because I may be very religious, should I force my religion on everyone else if they might not share my religious beliefs? And so that's what I'm saying, is like it gets kind of sticky for me, is that I can see, but then it's like when you start infringing on the quote unquote rights of other people with things that you believe, is like, where's the line drawn for that?
As historian Eric Foner, himself a Democrat, notes, in effect, the Klan was a military force serving the interests of the Democratic Party. President Woodrow Wilson, a Democrat, shared many views with the Klan. He resegregated many federal agencies and even screened the first movie ever played at the White House, the racist film, The Birth of a Nation, originally entitled The Klansman. A few decades later, the only serious congressional opposition to the landmark Civil Rights Act of 1964 came from Democrats. 80% of Republicans in Congress supported the bill, less than 70% of Democrats did. Democratic senators filibustered the bill for 75 days until Republicans mustered the few extra votes needed to break the logjam. And when all of their efforts to enslave blacks, keep them enslaved, and then keep them from voting had failed, the Democrats came up with a new strategy. If black people are going to vote, they might as well vote for Democrats, as President Lyndon Johnson was purported to have said about the Civil Rights Act. I'll have them voting Democrat for 200 years. So now, the Democratic Party prospers on the votes of the very people it has spent much of its history oppressing. Democrats falsely claim that the Republican Party is the villain, when in reality, it's the failed policies of the Democratic Party that have kept blacks down. Massive government welfare has decimated the black family. Opposition to school choice has kept them trapped in failing schools. Politically correct policing has left black neighborhoods defenseless against violent crime. So when you think about racial equality and civil rights, which political party should come to mind?
I know you really don't care about politics. And look, we don't watch politics that much. I used to watch a lot, but as the older I get, the more I start to have more of a disdain for things like this, because I see it more of as just a big separation. I see it as just putting people in different groups, no matter. And the thing is that with doing that, there's always the finger being pointed at the other group. If you're in the group, you're always pointing the finger at somebody else. Yeah. And
it's that, and for me, it's also the amount of money that is just wasted on these campaigns and stuff when,
it could go to something else.
Yeah.
I mean, it could go. And the thing is that if you really look back, I mean, this has been going on, since, first presidential race. They used to have, from my understanding, like I said, I am a history dodo, but from my understanding, they used to have actual duels where people used to shoot at each other. So I know people say it's bad now, but it seems like if you have, senators and, people that are elected officials that are dueling it out with guns, I think that was probably a little worse than what it is right now. But I think we have more commonalities. Because here's the thing, if you get out and you actually mingle with people of different backgrounds and different things, and you don't bring up politics, how much do people have in common? They have a lot of things in common. I think when you start talking about politics, that's when people start going to the corners.
Oh, and some people get angry.
Yeah, look, I had a black person get mad at me last week and try to start telling me off because they simply asked me, it was like, who you voting for? I was like, I don't know, but I don't think I'm voting Democrat this time. And I said, unless I'm giving other options. If you give me other options, possibly. I said, but if you give me other options, I'm not voting for that. And then they went to start it. Then I started to question them about some things. Because here's the thing. Like I said, if you've been in a black church, and I know this person's been in a black church, I started to ask them about a couple of things. I said, do you agree with this? Do you agree with this? Do you agree with this? And they was like, I was like, are you voting with your faith or are you voting with your conscience? I was like, so don't listen. I don't care what you do, but don't demonize me for feeling the way I feel. And so do what you want to do, but then don't demonize me, because the thing is that just because I feel a certain way about certain things, if I really start to question you about, honestly, if you really go to church and you're a faith believer, and I start to question you about some of the things that, that you're endorsing by going with some of these things. And here's the thing, I don't care. I really don't care. But like I said, when you ask me a question, you want to become confrontational with me about how I feel about something, then expect to push back from me also. You see what I'm saying? And so, but at that point in time, it's like, listen, we agreed to disagree. I told him, I was like, listen, I enjoyed talking to him. I said, but listen, they made me think about some things, but I also made them think about some things too, because, it's like, hey, I'm just going to go in and just, but now, listen, they're still going to do what they're going to do. But at the same time, I don't think they may approach someone the way they approached me about what I said, because I think I made them think a little bit. And here's the thing, I'm not a political, genius. I'm a very political novice, but just from being around a lot of different people, I see more of the commonalities until politics are brought up. That's when people start to divide. Anyway, other than that, anything to say? I know this wasn't your type of video, but I did see it on the ride down. So I saw this video on the ride down to Bike Week. This one over here was sleep, so I had to keep myself awake because I was pulling the trailer with bikes in it. And so since I have to keep myself awake, I find myself listening to YouTube videos, and I kind of stray off on this YouTube path sometimes. So this is where this video came from. So this is your doing. You should have stayed awake. You should have stayed awake, and we wouldn't have to do a video like this.